Welcome to this explainer. We're running today's session as a high-level strategic briefing. We've got a massive shift happening right now on the global energy chessboard. The United Arab Emirates has officially exited OPEC. And today, we're going to break down exactly what this means for U.S. strategic interests. For those of you tracking geopolitical and economic policy, this is an absolutely vital development.
Here is our intelligence docket for today. We'll be hitting 4 key areas: the situation report, U.S. domestic political stakes, advantage U.S. energy sector, and finally, geopolitical ripple effects. Let's dive right in.
Section 1. The Situation Report.
So here's the bottom line up front. The UAE's official exit from OPEC this past Friday, it's a huge shift in global energy dynamics, and importantly, it fundamentally aligns with U.S. interests. Why? Well, the U.S. administration actively welcomes any move that can curb the immense pricing power of the oil-producing cartel.
The core of the UAE's motivation and capacity here really boils down to one specific number: 2 million. You see, the UAE has invested heavily in their production capabilities, and they want to pump an additional 2 million barrels of oil per day as soon as regional supply chains get back to normal. That readiness to flood the market with new supply is a surefire way to put downward pressure on global prices.
And man, we really need that new supply right now given the current global crisis. Think about the timeline. We had pre-war stability, but that was totally shattered by the U.S.-Israel war on Iran. That conflict led directly to the retaliatory closure of the Strait of Hormuz. And since a whopping 20% of the world's oil transits through that exact bottleneck, global oil benchmarks like Brent crude futures have absolutely skyrocketed to $126.41 a barrel. The global market is literally starved for new supply.
Moving on to Section 2. U.S. domestic political stakes. Now, the sheer speed of this price jump on the ground poses a major domestic threat. Check this out. The day before the attack, the average price for a gallon of gas in the U.S. was $2.98. Post-retaliation and the Strait closure, it surged to $4.33. Prices have basically doubled. With the war now entering its 3rd month, that velocity is aggressively fueling inflation and whipping up some severe political headwinds here at home.
And soaring inflation translates directly to political risk, right? Especially with midterm elections coming up this November. We can see this pressure quantified in a recent Reuters/Ipsos poll, which shows President Trump's approval rating dropping from 36% in mid-April down to 34%. The economic pain people are feeling at the pump is undeniably registering as a tangible political vulnerability.
President Trump has been very vocal about this, drawing a direct line between ending the conflict and getting immediate economic relief. He recently stated, quote, "The gas will go down. As soon as the war is over, it'll drop like a rock." The administration is highly aware that they have to untangle this geopolitical knot in the Middle East before they can relieve the domestic economic pressure.
Okay, Section 3. Advantage U.S. energy sector.
Adnan Mazari, a senior fellow at the Peterson Institute, perfectly sums up the U.S. strategic view here. He points out that the U.S. would absolutely welcome a weakening of OPEC and OPEC+. By breaking away from the cartel's restrictive production quotas, the UAE is essentially diminishing OPEC's ability to artificially inflate global prices. So, a weakened OPEC? That is a definitive net positive for American strategic economic interests.
And this advantage is about way more than just the price of retail gasoline. It directly bolsters the entire U.S. petrochemical sector, which is already a massive global player. Fun fact, petrochemicals are actually the fastest-growing source of oil demand. So lower global oil prices, sparked by the UAE putting more oil on the market, secure the supply chains for vital goods. We're talking fertilizers for agriculture, medicines, clothing, and even clean energy tech like solar panels and EVs.
Plus, there's a flip side to the Strait of Hormuz disruption. It has inadvertently strengthened America's overall role. Because the U.S. is the largest global oil producer, domestic companies have actually raked in unusual profits during this squeeze. Now, sure, those profits might face some pressure when the UAE's new supply finally hits the market, but the overall U.S. strategic position remains incredibly advantageous, and it's being bolstered even further by increased access to Venezuelan oil.
Finally, Section 4. Geopolitical ripple effects.
Because remember, this whole situation isn't just about barrels of crude oil. Just last month, the UAE requested a currency swap line with the United States. Intelligence and economic experts identify this as a fundamentally political move. It's a very clear, very public signal of the UAE aligning itself economically and politically with Washington.
Right in the middle of all this regional instability, they are actively choosing to anchor their economic mechanisms to the U.S.
Rachel Zimba over at the Center for a New American Security highlights this perfectly. She calls the UAE's move a signal of openness to trade and an interest in helping the world restock. Strategically, this is huge because it opens the door for other OPEC members to follow their lead. As nations actively scramble to secure economic relationships that suit their own national interests, further defections from OPEC are going to dramatically crank up the downward pressure on global oil prices.
Which brings us to the ultimate strategic unknown. I want to leave you with this provocative thought raised by Adnan Mazari to ponder. Will the GCC survive? Think about it. As the UAE steps away from its traditional alliances and the ongoing war in Iran totally rewrites the rules for regional security and trade, can historical power blocs like the Gulf Cooperation Council survive this cutthroat new era of competition? The economic map of the Middle East is literally being redrawn right now, and the U.S. has to stay positioned to leverage the outcome. Thanks so much for joining me for this briefing.